For months, the city of Bakhmut was little more than rubble, yet both Russia and Ukraine fought for it like it was the crown jewel of Europe. Why? Because this wasn't just a battle over streets and buildings. It was a war of pride, politics, and propaganda. And in the middle of it all was a private army whose brutal tactics would shock the world and change the course of the war. But how did a city most people had never heard of become the deadliest hotspot of the entire conflict? Before the war, Bakhmut was just a sleepy mining town of 70,000. Salt mines, Soviet factories, and not much else. No political capital, no grand military base, and here's the crazy part. It wasn't even that important. At least, not on a map. After Ukraine withdrew from nearby Popasna on May 7, 2022, the Russians advanced to Bakhmut, but was faced with heavy resistance from the Ukrainians. The rest of the world saw this resistance in Bakhmut as a symbol of the Ukrainian resilience and determination to fight the Russians. President Zelensky even called it the fortress of our morale, a phrase painted on walls, whispered in trenches, and repeated in every speech about the city. So Russia wanted to prove a point. They wanted to crush this fortress and prove that Ukrainian resilience could be broken. That's why Russia saw Bakhmut as the next holy cake that must be eaten. So they directed their focus on Bakhmut. But Russia didn't just send normal soldiers, they unleashed the Wagner Group. These guys are brutal mercenaries made up of ex-special forces and thousands of convicted, hardened criminals with the promise of freedom if they survived 6 months. Well, most of them didn't last a month. In other fronts of the war at that time, Ukraine was successfully pushing the Russians back. But in Bakhmut, Russia kept pressing the necks of the Ukrainian army. They outnumbered the Ukrainians 3-1, with constant heavy artillery and endless waves of attacks. Both armies dug trenches into the city, and for months, neither side moved more than a few hundred meters. Artillery and small arms fire were flying everywhere. Satellite images showed whole neighborhoods flattened, trees stripped bare, and only dust and debris across what were once love parks. What I mean is that Wagner forces bombed the shit out of Bakhmut. The bombardment was constant. Russian guns hammered the city day and night, keeping the Ukrainian soldiers awake. And on the other hand, Ukrainian drones hunted Wagner positions day and night. They dealt with each other mercilessly, and neither side wanted the other to sleep. The fighting was so intense that even the birds seemed to avoid the skies over Bakhmut because they might get shot out of the skies. Journalists began calling it the meat grinder, a battlefield where lives were chewed up in the thousands for every block gained. And every soldier knew the city's real defense wasn't just weapons, it was Ukrainian stubbornness. And by February 2023, Wagner forces inched forward. They held most of the northern and southern parts of Bakhmut, threatening to encircle the whole city. But the Ukrainian army denied that it's over, launching attacks on the flanks to bleed Russian forces dry. But it was too late. The city has already fallen. May 20th, 2023, Prigozhin stands in front of a ruined apartment block and declares victory. Putin congratulates him, medals are handed out, and Bakhmut, or Artyomovsk as Russia calls it, is now officially a pile of rubble that, militarily now belongs to Russia. The front line moved on, but the scars remain. Bakhmut, the city the Ukrainians loved, is nothing but ruins and ashes wiped off the face of the earth. The battle for Bakhmut was a fight where every street and corner seemed to have its own warlord, and victory sometimes meant just holding on to a single ruined building for another day. But here's the real question. After all this blood and rubble, was Bakhmut worth it? Or was it just a city-sized game of King of the Hill with way too many explosions? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And please, don't fight in the comment section.